Hello, everyone. I've got the greatest pair of people on the show today from Paris. You don't want to miss this episode with Jean Guo, the CEO and co-founder, along with Binta Jammeh, the COO and co-founder of Konexio. They're doing amazing work in IT training for refugees there in France. You don't want to miss this.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Jean, Binta, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Devin. We're excited to be here.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're thrilled. We're absolutely thrilled. There have been so many refugees from Africa, Syria, Middle East, arriving in Europe the last few years that Americans have a hard time even comprehending. Give us a little sense of the impact and what's going on there in Paris as a result of the arrival of so many refugees.
Yeah, so I think, what we're experiencing here is obviously something that is experienced in other communities, other cities, and other countries. But just to give a global context, there's 65 million displaced people in the world. And within, the last few years, those numbers have been increasing in Europe. Specifically within the last 3 years, there are rates, I think, within just even the Paris, the metropolitan region, where we're seeing people, there's more and more work that needs to be done to help reach out to these individuals. So the rates of demand for asylum have jumped up more than 30% just within the last few years. And that's something, that has, effects over the whole region in general.
Binta, why don't you take a minute and just give us a sense of the job market and how things are looking there in Paris and Greater France?
Sure, absolutely. So I think even taking like a larger bird's eye view and looking at the job market in Europe, something we're seeing is that across Europe, over 90% of jobs in any field are going to require any candidate to have a basic level of digital skills. And that's certainly being felt here in France. For example, between now and 2020, there's going to be a vacancy in over close to 1 million posts requiring candidates to have a level of digital skills. And when we break that down even further, when we look at a specific job, such as that of a coder or a developer, there's going to be a vacancy of almost 200,000 applicants. So I think, looking at the job market in Europe and then zeroing that down into France, digital skills is definitely something that any candidate, no matter what background they're coming from, is going to have to be able to integrate into the modern day workforce.
It's really important, obviously. So, Jean, tell us a little bit about Konexio and what you're doing to address these issues.
Yeah, so I think for us, it's what we want to build is a movement in the sense that we want to work with people coming from all walks of life, having come from different communities who speak different languages and bring them together, but really empower them through digital learning and then connect them to larger communities. So we see our job as twofold. One, the training. So we have various programs that go from basic digital literacy, teaching people basic skills on how to use the computer, how to get access to their basic rights. A lot of this information is currently now digitalized, all the way up to being able to train them in more specific programs to becoming junior developers. And then the second part is really putting them in a community, because we realize that the students who have most success with Konexio are those who also get to meet companies who work with who are with other NGOs, and being able to put them in that rich ecosystem, we see as part of our job.
But tell us a little bit more about how you connect them to the greater community there. It is a tendency, it seems to me, for immigrants. I base this off of the refugee and immigrant communities in my own city here in Salt Lake City, but they sometimes get isolated. I think that's as much a fault, or maybe more a fault, of the long-term residents than the refugees, the new immigrants. But how do you help them maintain a sense of self, a sense of community within their own community, at the same time become part of the greater Paris community?
Sure, absolutely. So I think something that, really inspired us in creating Konexio and starting on this mission was the fact that currently, statistics show that only 12% of refugees here in France have interactions with the larger French community. So I think in seeing that, we immediately saw that that's something that we need to find a way to tackle. And so, kind of piggybacking off of what Jean was saying, in terms of the community of partners we build, we focus on, having access to associations, to private partners, to public partners who provide students access to social activities, cultural activities, professional development activities, educational activities, and then even looking at, Konexio as a team itself. We bring together refugees, migrants, local citizens, expats, a real hodgepodge of different people coming together to all work with, a community of refugees, and to give this idea of us all being part of a global network, but working on a local solution.
Jean, why don't you take a minute now and talk about go a little deeper on the programs that you've developed to provide skills, because obviously being able to be well employed is central to the economic success of a new immigrant, regardless of their circumstances upon immigrating to any country, but certainly that would be true in Paris.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of how the programs are shaped and how we've developed them is we really ask for the feedback of our students, constantly working to improve, being agile. And so what we've actually developed is a blended learning model. The idea being that we want our students to meet other people, to be physically in centers we're working with teachers and volunteers, but that we realized actually nearly 3/4 of our students actually have access to smartphones. It's kind of their connection to the world in a sense for information, to connect to people. And so we said, well, you're using, your phone every day to check Facebook. Why not also add just the 15 minutes on top of that, for example, for reviewing the exercises we went over in classes, taking quizzes. So the idea is that we reinforce their learning, online with the presence, and, there's a form component where they're able to interact also with their other classmates, with the teachers. And so the idea is that in the classes themselves, we want them to actually have this extra supplementary support. And so the idea also for us is to make sure when we're developing the programs that we really think about what are the complexity of skills that are really necessary. So on one hand, we have a focus on the French, technical language that you need to learn when you're first learning. There's so many words that are related to the use of a computer, to, a browser, all these functions that are actually very, very useful, vital, I think, in daily, professional life. And then the second part is making sure that there are also some of the soft skills that we don't necessarily train for, but are equally important to getting them integrated. So we really focus on the digital training, and then we actually work with partners, including Salesforce, including SAP, who will go through it and work with our students to teach them basic skills from how do I interview, how do I create a CV, a LinkedIn profile, all the way to, how do I work within a team and pick up the social codes that really give them, the final foot in the door in terms of being integrated professionally in France.
Binta, I know these are early days, but Binta, maybe you could give us some sense of the results, outcomes. What are you seeing? How are lives being impacted?
Absolutely. So, since launching Konexio in 2016, we've had the pleasure of working with over 120 students. And in going through our first round of impact evaluation, we found that, of the students surveyed, over 70% went on to have positive outcomes. So meaning that, students either created their own entrepreneurial projects after coming through Konexio. So we have students who are incubated with their own projects now in the Paris startup ecosystem. We've also had students who've gone on to find their own professional work experience. So we have students who are working as designers, developers. We have one student we're incredibly proud of who's now working as an intern at L'Oreal as a result of going through our program. And thirdly, we have students who've gone on to continue their education programs. So we have a student here who's recently graduated with a master's from the Sorbonne. We have other students who are going to top engineering and business schools. And even beyond that, 94% of the students we've worked with have continued to use the digital skills in their professional and personal lives after going through our courses. And 94%, after joining the Konexio community, do feel more socially integrated to their local community here in France. So I think since, we've started to see these positive outcomes, and for us, it's always looking at a way in which we can capitalize and continue to grow on this.
Jean, what are you most proud of having accomplished?
I think what we are most proud of, I think, as a team is that we've been able to bring on other people who are just as inspired to go. Sometimes we're are fully dedicated to this, but being able to inspire, professionals within companies or some of the volunteers who've been with us since, the beginning, and to actually also for us see the dedication that our students put into the classes. We found out, within some of our first cohorts, some of the students were coming 100 kilometers away by train every week to take our classes. And to be able to show that, there's a real motivation to learn, there's a real motivation to become part of the community. I think that's really important for us, and that also helps, show other students that this is someone, I can be like this person who has actually succeeded. Even though there's all these barriers we see from the language to, some of the administrative processes, but I can see someone who's actually made it, and, how that can actually push others to do the same.
Oh, that's inspiring. Binta, what is the most important lesson you've learned?
There have been quite a few lessons that we've learned since, going on this journey of launching Konexio. But I think one of the most important for me and for Jean as well is this idea that while we are very rooted in this idea of tech for good, it's tech for good, but with a human touch. And so for us, we never want to lose sight of the fact that first and foremost, we're a community of individuals, of people committed to having an impact, not only on our local communities, but eventually on, our global communities as well. And so, looking at the fact that while we're working with refugees and migrants here and other disadvantaged populations, it's not just for us to be coming up with these solutions, but it's also to really include the publics we're working with and the solutions we're working on. So, not really just us, this idea of us sitting in our ivory tower and kind of coming up with these ideas on our own, but being on the ground, speaking to our students, speaking to our partners, speaking to the people who make Konexio what it is, to find ways to continuously improve it and to continuously make it better.
Jean, I'm curious about how you've ended up in Paris. You speak English with an American accent, so I presume you have American roots. How did you end up in Paris, and then why on earth, in the city of lights and all the opportunities there, why you've tackled this project?
Yeah, I think there's, two levels of it. There's one that's, very personal to me, and there's one that is more, on the professional, the academic side. So I actually originally came to France on a Fulbright. And so I was actually working with the Paris School of Economics. One of the projects I chose to research on was the inclusion of migrants. And when I was on the ground to really understand what was going on, I realized that there were some gaps that a lot of, at the time, a lot of the aid that was distributed out really focused on frontline, which is very, very important, on food and shelter, but that we also needed to think about long-term education and jobs, and specifically jobs that were high in demand, jobs that were objective in terms of their skills, that, someone from a foreign background who might face otherwise other types of discrimination can have real access to. And so for me, on the personal level, it's because, growing up as an immigrant and, in a single family with my mother, I realized I saw the barriers growing up too, when you don't speak the language, when your mother is afraid to read the mail because she doesn't understand it. I think there was some personal side for me that I wanted to figure out a way I can concretely help. And I was already working with a community where I saw very upfront that need, and I heard stories over and over again about wanting to figure out a way also to support themselves, to support their families.
Fantastic. Binta, what about you? You too speak English with an American accent. How did you end up in Paris, and why are you engaged in this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Paris on a Fulbright scholarship as well. And so my research focused on working with low-income school districts, low-income students, and looking at ways in which to increase access to professional, social, and educational opportunities. And so it's the type of work that I've been involved with, for a few years. And so coming to Paris was just an extension of that. So kind of similar to Jean, there's a personal and professional connection. So, my parents immigrated to the US as well from West Africa. And so growing up, I saw how difficult it was to find ways in which to integrate into a community and to a new country that's not your own, where you don't necessarily speak the language very well, where you don't necessarily have an entrenched community of support. And so really having to struggle amongst those barriers to find a place for yourself is something that I think drew us to the mission of Konexio. And then even looking at us, certainly not the same context as our students, but we ourselves, are immigrants here in France. And so I think in coming here and going through that journey as well, it kind of gives us an idea of how difficult it can be to find yourself, a quote unquote, a stranger in a strange land, and really go through the process to, create a new community and create a new life. And so I think those are lines that really, drew us to each other and drew us to the mission of Konexio.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Jean, what is your superpower?
I would say if I had a superpower, I would love to be able to speak all the languages of the world. I'm kind of fascinated by languages. I have some that I really want to pick up, but I feel like being able to communicate with people really opens up doors, to understanding their cultures and bridging kind of that divide, which is, very much needed now where we are in the world.
So what languages do you already speak, Jean?
I speak Chinese, English, French, some Spanish. Yeah, stop there.
She's well on her way.
Pretty good start. Binta, what about you? What's your superpower?
I guess mine is a bit more silly, but I think my superpower would be to time travel, because I've always been a huge history buff, and just, the opportunity to travel back to any time period in history I'd like and kind of observe everything from the sidelines, I think would be a pretty cool superpower to have. And
yeah.
Me going back to the past and finding Jean and helping her out on the language learning path.
What languages do you speak, Binta?
So I speak French, Italian, Wolof, a bit of Spanish, and a tiny bit of German as well, and
Excellent.
Thai.
Now, Wolof, where is that language spoken?
Yeah, so Wolof is the predominant language in Senegal and the Gambia, so in Western Africa.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, listen, I really appreciate both of you taking the time to tell your stories this morning, share it with us. I know you're busy, but before you go, I wonder, Jean and Binta, if you would each just take a minute and tell us how we can learn more about Konexio and connect with each of you personally.
Yeah, so Konexio, we have, our social media, our website is at Konexio, KONEXIO.eu. We also have a Facebook page, which is, facebook.com/Konexio.eu. And I think in terms of engaging with us personally, our email addresses are on our website, and we love to hear and always, learn about people who are interested in our mission. We've gotten, requests from people from different countries learning about how, can we take a similar model and, implement it there. So, or even others who've contacted us from different continents wanting to join our team. So we always welcome that. So feel free to go to our website and to, meet us there.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram. So make sure to follow us there as well. It's Konexio_EU.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Jean, Binta, I'm so grateful to both of you for taking the time today, and wish you both every success in working successfully with the refugee community there in Paris.
Thanks, Devin.
All righty, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.